Hi everyone, it is a Saturday, so I thought it was a good time to start a new themed reading vlog. Earlier this year, I made a video where I went through my first year of book hauls on this channel, which was October 2014 to September 2015, and I counted how many books from that year I still hadn't read, and I said by the end of this year I would like to read several, and it is nearly the end of this year, and I have read a couple, but not as many as I would like. So I have pulled off my shelves. Can I move this without letting it fall? All of the books from that video that I have not read yet, and we have 13 books here. I'm not going to be reading all of these over the course of this video because I'm planning on filming this over the next, I don't know, 6-7 days, and that would be a big ask, but I am going to try and get to as many of these as possible in the next few days. So I thought I would quickly show you them now. I'm not going to go over the blurbs because I am going to be talking about the books as I read them, but let me try and give you a brief one-sentence summary, which is a challenge for books that you haven't read yet. But this is Kazuo Ishiguro's The Buried Giant. It's the only book of his that I haven't read yet, and it is his only fantasy novel. This is The Sparrow by Mary Doria Russell. This is a science fiction book tied in with religion, similar in theme to The Book of Strange New Things by Michelle Faber. This is No One Is Here Except All of Us by Ramona Ausabel, which is a novel about a small community in Romania who are hiding away during the Second World War. This, I don't know why I have. This is one I definitely want to read the beginning of and decide whether or not I want to keep at least, because this is The Tongues of Men or Angels by Jonathan Trigell. It's hard to read that font actually, but this is a really religious book set just after Jesus died, and I don't know why I bought this book. You know, I'm into reading religious themes in book, but not books that are specifically only about religion. I'm not sure why I purchased this one, but there must have been a reason at the time. So I would like to read the beginning of that at least and see if it's something that I still would like to read. This is Fairytales for Wild Girls by Allyse Neer. And the first line of the blurb is, "There's a dead girl in a birdcage in the woods." This is By Night the Mountain Burns by Juan, Tomas, Avila, Laurel, and it's translated by Jethro Sutar from Spanish, I think. Yeah, it's translated from the Spanish, and this is set on a remote island off the coast of West Africa, and it's about superstition and the weather and the sea. This is an Bronte novel that I haven't read yet called The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. We got a short story collection by Mayhew Bergman called Almost Famous Women, which is about almost famous women. A classic called The Purple Cloud by MP Shiel, which is a post-apocalyptic novel. I think a man has travelled to the North Pole, but then when he comes back, the world is on fire. Great. This is The Drum Tower, which is another fantasy book. It's interesting looking at the books that I have been putting off. There are several classics, several fantasy books, a couple of short story collections. Those tend to be the things that get left on my shelves the longest, apparently. This is The Drum Tower by Farnoosh Moshiri, and this is about two sisters who are trying to escape. One of them is dressed up as a boy. It's set in Tehran. I mean, it's been sitting on my shelf for so long. This is a short story collection by Janice Galloway called Jellyfish. We've got a Persephone here called The Hopkins Manuscript by R.C. Sheriff, which is about the moon colliding with the earth. And then we have a short story collection by Heather O'Neill called Daydreams of Angels. And this is very fairy tale inspired. I'm not going to pick this one up during the reading vlog because it's a Patreon book club book for December. So I know I'm going to get to that before the end of the year anyway. So we're choosing from the other 12 books. I think I might begin with Kazuo Ishiguro's book. I think that's where I'll start. Then over the course of this video, I'm going to be talking to you about the books that I end up picking up, what I think of them. I'm going to include some recipes, some baking, some cooking, because you know that I like to include that in reading vlogs, and then also some walks as well. This video is very kindly sponsored by Serious Readers, which we'll talk about later. But in the meantime, put your shoes on, because let's go for a walk. first cup of tea of the day is sponsored by my neighbour whose car alarm went off at 2 a.m, 3 a.m, and 4 a.m. I may never make baked goods for them again. We're not off to a great start today. We're also not off to a great start with reading. I started reading Very Giant by Kazuo Ishiguro, and I have DNF'd it at 100 pages in. But I don't mind DNFing. As I've said before, life is too short. I don't want to obviously DNF books because I want to love books, but if I'm not loving it and I don't see that improving, like if it's something integral to the book that I'm not liking, then that's okay. So I can see why this book divides people. I've had a real hit and miss relationship with Kazuo Ishiguro's books before. He's written some of my favourite books of all time, like Never Let Me Go. Remains of the Day is one that grew on me over time. I still think about it a lot. Clara and the Sun, his most recent title, I enjoyed. I haven't really enjoyed his historical novels like When We Were Orphans. That wasn't my cup of tea. And The Unconsoled, I didn't enjoy either. But this one, as I said, is his only fantasy book. It's a little bit like Tolkien, but definitely not as plot driven as something like that. But the language feels very old school fantasy. I read it and this is what it reminded me of, okay? It reminded me of the new film of The Green Knight, which I also DNF'd. If we can DNF films. Yes, did not finish. I was thinking, are there bookish terms in that phrase? There are not. Yes, I DNF'd The Green Knight as well because it was very beautifully filmed. I could see they were doing interesting things with it, but my goodness, I was so bored. And this book, The Buried Giant, didn't even have Dev Patel in it to try and keep me going. And that's a shame. So this is a book that's set just after the Romans have left Britain, and it's about a couple called Axel and Beatrice, and they live in this strange town. And this is definitely, I could feel the Never Let Me Go vibes to it, because it's a town where people forget things and they don't really remember if they have any children, and then they remember that they maybe have a son, and then they think, oh, we should go and visit our son, but there was a reason that they don't see him. There's a mist that comes down and makes people forget, reminiscent of Yoko Ogawa's The Memory Police. So I thought that was really intriguing, and I like the narrator's voice because it is told by a narrator, but the dialogue between the characters is so stilted. Axel calls his wife Princess about 3 or 4 times on every page, which made me want to slap things. It does have references to King Arthur, which I like, but if I can be blunt, I am bored. I am very, very bored. And I looked at reviews. This is something that Mercedes actually taught me. Mercedes, wise Mercedes. She said once that if she's really not enjoying a book, what she'll do is go and look at reviews of the book, specifically negative ones from people, to see if what they didn't like about the book is what she doesn't like about the book, and whether or not that changes the further on that you get. And all the reviews that I looked at said that they really enjoyed the beginning, but that it got boring towards the end. And I was thinking, but I'm bored right now and I'm only 100 pages in. So this one, sorry, Kazu, but this one, not for me. So I'm going to pass this on to somebody else, and instead I'm going to pick up R.C. Sheriff's The Hopkins Manuscript, which is the classic Persephone about the moon colliding with the earth. And because I didn't get much sleep, I'm also going to have some drop scones for breakfast, because I'm an adult and I can make these decisions for myself. I made some yesterday and I decided to put the rest of the batter in the fridge. Drop scones are they're also called Scotch pancakes. They're kind of like small versions of American pancakes. I'll leave a recipe down below, but they are delicious, and you have them with butter and jam. Very, very nice. So I'm going to have that, and then I'll come back to you, hopefully with better news about books. Fingers crossed. Oh, folks, the lighting in here, it's very, it's actually matching my wig, I feel. It's very orange. We have an orange filter going on. I'm filming at night, that's why. There's a reason, and we'll get onto that in a second. I've just finished watching the Great British Bake Off final, and I won't say who won in case anyone hasn't caught up yet, but I cried a lot. I didn't expect to cry that much. I think it's my favourite final that I've ever watched, and I got really emotional. It, yeah, took me by surprise, but I just thought it was bloomin' lovely. And I'm also having a good time with reading now, which is frankly a relief, because who wants to watch a reading vlog where I hate everything that I'm reading? I mean, I'm sure some of you might, but I wouldn't have a good time making that video, so it wouldn't be fun for me. But now I'm about halfway through the Hopkins manuscript, and I want to whisper this, but I feel like it could be one of my favourite books of the year. I don't know. I'm going to stop whispering now, but I'm really, really enjoying that. I mentioned at the beginning of this video that this is very kindly sponsored by Serious Readers, so I would like to take a couple of minutes to talk to you about them. Please don't skip ahead, because these people are chef's kiss and I'm very excited to talk about them. For context, I think I must decline about between 95 and 99% of the sponsorship inquiries that land in my inbox, normally because they're companies that I respect, but they're just not a good fit for this channel. More recently, I've been receiving sponsorship inquiries from miracle cure companies who make hair growth products, and I'm sure you can imagine the very colourful responses that they receive when they land in my inbox. Wig flick. But at the other end of the scale, I got an email a couple of weeks ago from a company called Serious Readers. And side note, this is something that I just want to throw in there because I would like to know this. The email correspondence that I have had with them has been really warm and friendly and lovely, and they're just a very professional, kind bunch. So I have enjoyed that. It's always nice to know that a company is nice. But when I researched who they were before replying to their email, I thought, I was actually really angry with myself, thinking, why don't I own one of their products already? I do now, because they've sent me some and I love them, but it's such a perfect fit for me, and I know that lots of you watching will also be interested in what they make. So Serious Readers is a company that makes reading lights. The lights can be used for other things as well, but primarily, obviously, I'm going to be talking about reading because this is a booktube channel and that is what I'm going to be using this light for. But they do table lights and floor lights, and they have this technology which means that the light replicates daylight, which is why it's so amazing. If you have been around here a while, you will know, or may not know, part of my disability means that my eyesight is deteriorating. So having a really good reading light, it makes a big difference. I like it. Let me do a cutaway here so you can see the light that they have sent me. So they have sent me the Serious Readers high definition light. And as I mentioned, their lights, their high definition ones and their Allyse lights use something called daylight wavelength technology, which replicates the daylight spectrum as closely as they possibly can, which makes it a more comfortable reading experience if you're reading after the sun goes down. So their lights come with all kinds of customizable options. So I chose the color, I chose the handle on this, different colored bodies, arms, height adjustability, and you can also opt for cordless technology as well. This light comes with a dimmer, which I enjoy immensely, so you can choose how strong you want the light to be. All of their lights come with a 5-year warranty as well. Serious Readers is a British company and their Serious lights are made in the UK. And I have been reading the extra material that came with my light. They haven't asked me to include this, but I just think it's really cool, so I just wanted to share. So at the beginning of the company, the founder, he designed a specialist sewing light for Singer. So for the sewing machine company, Singer, which is very, very famous. So he made lights for them. Then they went on to make lights for surgeons and to go on space shuttles. So it says in here that their lights have gone as far into space as humans have, and as deep into the ocean as humans have as well, because their lights are used in situations where it's very important to have good lights. So that should tell you how great they are. And then after working in all of these fields, the founder, Alex, then took a personal turn in the company and decided to make or design a reading light for his mum, which became the prototype for the light that I have just showed you. So I just think that's all really nice. So I just wanted to share that extra bit. I'm going to leave a link in the description box down below where you can go and check out the Serious Readers range. If you are in the market for a high quality reading light, I really, really recommend them. And because I want to give something back to you as well, I'm going to read this so that I get this correct. There is an offer if you use the code GEN15, which means that if you buy a light in the Serious Lights range, high definition, Alex light or classic light, you will receive a free compact light valued at £150 with your order. I will insert a clip of said compact light here, which is a great desk light or bedside reading light. So thank you very much to Serious Readers for sponsoring this video. Honestly, I'm in love with my reading light and I will be using it for the foreseeable future. I have to disappear now because I need to go and do a book event in Sweden, not in person, but online, so I need to go do that, and then afterwards I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about the Hopkins manuscript and why I am loving it quite as much as I am.
And now Paula asks, do you have a favorite characters that you like to write about? I think this is like all over your books. I mean, do they have any particular characteristics, either in their personality or appearance?
I mean, I have to be careful because I think all writers have their quirks that they go back to. So I kind of have a list of things that I have to ration myself on now.
Good morning. I thought I would sit down and talk to you about why I'm enjoying the Hopkins manuscript so much. I mentioned in the last clip that I'm about halfway through. This is the novel about the moon colliding with the earth, and it is hilarious and also really harrowing. And I think that's a very smart decision tone-wise on the part of the author, because this is a dystopian, apocalyptic, post-apocalyptic book. And when we do find ourselves in terrifying times, we do this dance between being very, very scared and finding things funny, but in a very over the top kind of way. And we can dance between these two extremes when we don't have something concrete and hopeful to hold on to. So I think the tone of this is really, really good. The book is framed in a similar way to something like Poor Things by Alistair Gray, in the sense that it has a fake introduction that is part of the novel. So the introduction is presenting itself as fact. It is written by explorers from 1,000 years in the future who say that, as the reader knows, Western civilization was wiped out 1,000 years ago, and we don't know anything about the history of Great Britain at all. In fact, the only thing that they had in their museum, or one of the only things they had, was a sign that they had unearthed which said, "Please keep off the grass." And I just found it ridiculous and hilarious and brilliant that the only thing that was left of our country was a passive-aggressive sign. And I mean, fair. So what they say is that they have found this thing called the Hopkins manuscript, and they are presenting it, and that it is their only reference for the last days of Great Britain and of Europe as well. We don't know the ins and outs of what has happened to the rest of the world, but it's hinting at the fact that most of Europe and the UK has been completely obliterated. So that's where we start. So we kind of know the ending at the beginning, which is something that I do like in a novel. And then we start reading the manuscript, the diary of a man called Hopkins. It's really ironic that this is the diary that they happen to find as well, because Hopkins has this chip on his shoulder. He is so angry that people in the world don't realize how brilliant he is and how important he is. And he spends a lot of his time berating others internally over this matter. So it's fitting and ironic that his account is the only one that actually gets fame in the end. It just happens to be after he's dead and he knows nothing about it. I'm currently at the moment watching American Crime Story Impeachment, and Hopkins reminds me quite a lot of Linda Tripp. So you can imagine what kind of personality he has got. I'm not sure how old Hopkins is. I imagine he's in his 50s, and he lives in a house on his own, and he breeds hens. He breeds bantam hens, and every time I read that, I think it says Batman hens, and I'm like, wow, that would be really interesting. That's a whole other story. Maybe a spin-off that we could ask for another time. So he breeds chickens, and he thinks that this is one of the most important things that you could possibly do. He's very proud of the fact that his hens have won prizes. He's very angry when people don't know who he is, because he's a super famous chicken breeder, and why haven't you heard of him? And he also has a side interest in the moon. So he's part of the Lunar Society, and he goes to a meeting one day with the Lunar Society, and he is informed that scientists have realized that the moon is about to collide with the Earth, and they have been granted this secret information as people who like looking at the moon through a telescope. It seems odd that they have been granted this information, because they are not important people, even though Hopkins would really like to think he is an important person. And they are told that for the next 3 months, they can't tell anybody that the moon is going to collide with the Earth, because it will cause widespread panic. And they're thinking of a way to try and tell the population of the world that something this terrible is going to happen. So this gives Hopkins an even bigger sense of self-importance, because he knows this huge secret, but he can't tell anyone. So he lords over everyone in his village smugly until the time comes when they find out. And he's like, I knew all along. Something hilarious that he does in the interim period where he knows about the end of the world and other people don't, is he's thinking about the fact that Captain Williams, one of his neighbours, pays him 4 guineas a year for his meadow grass, and that he is responsible for scything and stacking it in a corner of the field and collecting it as necessary. He pays him twice a year in June and December, it says, and it occurred to me as I watched him at work that if the worst happened on the 3rd of May, when they're predicting the moon is going to collide with the Earth, he would get 4 months of my grass for nothing. I did not resent this personally, but knowing what an honest man he was, I realised that he would never forgive me if I allowed him to die in my debt. So I decided to drop him a line, suggesting that he paid me quarterly instead, so that his guinea upon the 25th of March would practically cover the grass until the end. It's so petty. He is a very, very petty man. I wanted to read you this particular paragraph because it rang very true to recent times. So this is after everyone has found out about the moon and how it is on course to collide with our dear planet. In the opinion of the country gentleman, the moon business was all a scare. Nothing would happen, and if it did, it would happen in China, where that sort of thing always happened. In their opinion, it would not affect England. Things like that did not happen in England. We should muddle through, as we always had done in our other troubles. We had a government with a strong majority, and the police were equal to anything. I am loving it so far. There is quite a bit of fat phobia from the point of view of the narrator, Hopkins, but we're not supposed to like him. Like, we're not supposed to like the way that he talks to people or thinks about people. So I feel as if it's representative of his character and not a comment by the author. I mean, that's a hard thing to gauge sometimes, but that's definitely how I feel about it right now. So yeah, I'm halfway through. Today I have a 3-hour hospital appointment, so I'm hoping I can finish the book during that appointment. The other day, I wanted to include this somewhere in the video, so I thought I would include it here. The other day, Mr. M and I went for a walk in our local woods, and if you've been here a while, you know, especially over the last 18 months, the woods have been such a great place of solace, but also we've just seen some really interesting, weird, wonderful things there. I'll link a video down below where I was talking about the foxes that live there, and in that video, I think I also talk about how a family had left a fairy realm. They'd made a fairy realm and left it for children to enjoy in the forest, which was really lovely. And the other day when we went for a walk just before sunset, someone, and I don't know who, had put out all of these paper lanterns. So they'd made them in paper bags and they were LED lights, so they weren't going to set fire to the forest. There was no naked flame anywhere, don't worry. And they had just put these paper lanterns hanging on trees everywhere for people to enjoy just for a few hours. I don't know who did it, and I just don't know, but honestly, it made me cry. I was just like, this is so beautiful. People are all right sometimes, you know? So I will insert a little bit of a clip of that, and then I'll come back to you once I finish the book. I'm bringing you Smurf energy this morning. I think I did end up finishing the Hopkins manuscript. It got quite stressful, as you might imagine, being a book about the moon colliding with the earth. It was stressful at points, and I don't want to talk more about the plot of this book so much, but it's definitely going to be one of my favourite books of the year. I don't have to whisper that anymore. It's really brilliant, and it kind of turned into a little bit of a climate change novel, and also commentary on the British Empire and colonialism. And I loved the direction that it took. And this book was written, I think, in 1939. Is that right? Let me check this. Yeah, in 1939. So in many ways, I feel like this book is very ahead of its time. Actually, I wanted to read you just this quote from it, where it's talking about the moon before the moon collides with the earth, and it's got obviously really huge because it's closer to the earth, and what that looks like. It just felt so eerie. Now and then came a thin, uneasy gust of wind. It came like something jerked from a powerful spring. It hissed through the bushes, twanged through the branches of the elms, and sighed away to die upon the downs. And between these strange, unnatural gusts, there lay a stagnant deadness, with a thin, metallic flavour in the air that seemed to twist the back of my nostrils and bring a pain to my temples. It was the first night of the disturbances that the newspapers so lightly brushed aside each morning, the first night of the strange whisperings that were now to remain with us until the end. No one sought to explain them. I doubt if even the scientists understood. The nights began to turn uneasily in their sleep, as if they no longer trusted themselves with the guardianship of the world and were impatient to hand us back to the safety of the day. How brilliant is that? Reading the biography at the back, it's not surprising to me that R.C. Sheriff wrote plays and also wrote for screen. He later wrote The Dam Busters, was at least part of the writing team for that, and also wrote the script for Goodbye Mr. Chips. Because this book is so cinematic in its nature, it would make a really, really great film. I don't think it's been made into a film before. This was only published by Persephone in 2006, so I don't think it has. I would love for it to be made into a film. When I came out of my appointment yesterday, the hospital is right next to Tower Bridge, so I went for a little quick walk around the streets of Bermondsey because I miss the centre of London. The only time I get to see it is when I go to hospital appointments. And I saw this dog, which I thought I would share because I thought he was a very good boy, peering out at the street, making sure that everything was okay, a guardian of London, and then walked past Tower Bridge, which I will also insert here in case anyone is missing some quintessential views of the centre of London. I really did feel like a tourist in my own city. This was a great, great book. How wonderful. I like to think that was just Lola living out her Little Mermaid fantasy. She actually found the wig very cozy and went to sleep under it straight after that. I am here to report back that from not loving a book to loving a book, we've gone back to not loving a book. So we're having a wave of a time over here. I decided to try the beginning of The Tongues of Men or Angels, and as I suspected, this one is not for me. I don't think would ever have been for me. Not really sure why I picked up this one, but it has been living on my shelves now for about 7 years. I think it's time that it went to a home where it can be enjoyed. And then I also picked up this, which is Fairytales for Wild Girls by Allyse Nia. And this one, I think, could have been one I might have enjoyed maybe in my early 20s. I think what I look for in a book has changed now. I'm trying to think of whether or not it would have been one that I would have enjoyed at the time of purchasing it, possibly, but I was in my late 20s. I'm not sure. It's a very earnest book. It's extremely enthusiastic. It feels almost, well, it does feel over the top in its descriptions of people and place. It says she had a great mass of wavy hair, so blonde it burned Edgar's scalp to think about, rainbow streaks at the roots like melted Skittles, navy blue lipstick to match an oceanic gush of a party frog. It would be lovely if that was the occasional sentence, but I felt that like nearly every sentence was like that, and it's just too overwrought. It's too rich, and every chapter is chopping and changing. They're very short, they change form between script and then prose, introducing new ideas all the time. So the main character sees something horrific on television, and then we learn something about her family history, and then we learn that maybe she has an invisible brother, and then she goes to a party and she meets someone who's just moved in across the street, and I'm like, wait, can we slow down? Can we root ourselves in this story? I don't feel settled yet. I feel very disorientated, and maybe that's what the author wants me to feel, but it makes me not trust their craftsmanship. It makes me feel like they don't know how to start a story, so they're just throwing in every beginning to this story that they possibly can. It doesn't feel polished. It feels like several drafts just thrown together, and I'm not really a fan of that. And there are some descriptions in here that make me feel uneasy, like Aladdin eyes and Holocaust thin, which don't really sit well with me. So this one, I think I'm also going to part ways with as well. This evening, I'm gonna make myself a butternut squash lasagna. Normally I do this with sweet potatoes. It should be done with butternut squash, but I can never cut into a butternut squash. But then one of you said to me, if you just cook the butternut squash for a little while whole in the oven, it'll obviously soften and then you can cut it up easily, which is genius. So I am going to make a lasagna tonight, and I kind of make up the recipe as I go, but I will leave a link down below to something that's vaguely similar if you fancy checking it out yourself. So yeah, I'm going to do that this evening and then hopefully dive into some more books that I will end up enjoying. Let's see if we can go up again. I hope that you will be pleased to hear that we are ending on a positive note. So we really have done this all the way through the course of the reading vlog. So the final book that I have picked up is The Drum Tower by Farnoosh Moshiri. And it's interesting to pick this up after putting down Fairytales for Wild Girls, because in that book, as I said, it felt rather chaotic and that the author was throwing all of these potential seedlings for stories around, whereas in this book, which is a family saga and it keeps going back to individual characters' childhoods and saying what their narrative has been so far, it feels very purposeful, it feels very intentional, and I trust the author. As I'm reading this, I feel like I'm in safe hands so far. This is about a young girl called Talcoon who lives in a place called the Drum Tower with her musical sister and her grandparents, as well as her uncle. Her uncle, not very nice. I've only read the first 30 pages. I'm not really sure what's going on with him, but I think maybe there is some abuse going on there. So the girl's mother left, and there's a mystery around that, and I'm sure that's going to be part of the story as we move through the book. So the mother left, and their grandmother, the girl's grandmother, hated their mother, and she takes out the anger that she has for their mother on them because they're the only people who remain. Their grandfather has become absorbed with trying to find the truth about this mythical creature called the Simorg. And what I thought was really fun is that I have this book, which I have pulled off my shelf, and this is The Secret Language of Birds. And I don't really know anything about the Simorg, who I know it is a figure in mythology. So I thought I would find the entry in this book so that I could find out some more about it before reading on, and hopefully this won't ruin the story for me because I assume this is some kind of retelling, which I don't know the bones of. Let's see what it says. The Simorg is a Persian bird, another bird of profound longevity. Having lived so long, it has seen the world end 3 times so far. With the head of a dog and 4 wings, it resides in the tree of knowledge, which is laden with seeds from all the plants in the world, with the result that when the bird flies from the tree, these seeds are scattered in all directions. actions. The Simurgh seems to be a kind bird and is willing to foster children. Indeed, there's a story that the birds foster an unwanted child called Zal. So maybe this is what the book is retelling, given that these two girls don't seem to be loved very much by their grandparents at the moment. So I'm going to wrap it up here because I think that I've spoken about quite a few titles in here. Great that I am enjoying The Drum Tower at the moment. I hope I continue to enjoy it, and I will talk about it in my wrap up. So glad to have read the Hopkins manuscript and for it to now probably be one of my favorite books of the year. That's really exciting. And yeah, there were some books in this video that I didn't end up enjoying, but at least I know that now and they can go on to better homes. It's probably not surprising that there were going to be some books in this pile that I either don't gel with anymore or was never going to gel with, because sometimes books sit on our shelves for ages because we're just waiting for the right time to pick them up. But sometimes we've picked them up before and read the first few chapters and thought, not right now, but maybe there was a deeper reason as opposed to it just wasn't the right time. Thank you so much again to Serious Readers for sponsoring this video. Please go and check them out. Their lamps are fantastic. There is a link in the description box down below. And don't forget, if you use that code, you get a free lamp as well. I hope you're all doing okay. I would love to know in the comment section what the oldest book on your TBR is. So not the book that is the oldest age-wise, but the book that you have owned for the longest. Please let me know. I hope you're all doing all right, and I'll speak to you very soon. Lots of love. Bye.